Well, good evening and welcome to the Families, Health and Wellbeing Select Committee. And a very warm welcome too to those attending and to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Philip Corthorne and I am the Chairman of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible online under the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if microphone is switched on, so please remember that. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm goes off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices before the meeting starts or put them on silent. Please note that councillors on the committee may use their laptops or tablets during the meeting to view the agenda paperwork. Coming on to the attendees this evening, I'll introduce the councillors, members of the committee present. So we've got Mr Tony Little to my left, Councillor Scott Foley from Labour Group, Councillor Kerry Prince, the Labour Group lead. To my right, immediate right, we've got Councillor Mcconnell, the Vice Chairman of the committee, Councillor Becky Hagar from the Conservative Group, as is Councillor Steve Tuckwell. Can I at this point ask the officers present to introduce themselves, please? Perhaps starting with you, Kate, if that's all right.
I'm Kate Kelly-Talbot, Director of Service Delivery for Adult Social Work.
Gary Collier, Health and Social Care Integration Manager.
Head of Joint Commissioning for North West London Clinical Commissioning Group for Hillingdon.
And I'm Richard Ellis, Joint Borough Director for Hillingdon within North West London Clinical Commissioning Group.
Thank you, welcome. Yes, perhaps, yes, let's ask our witnesses to introduce themselves. We'll be hearing from you in a moment or two, but please, go ahead. The gentleman at the top, you don't know you're at the top, do you? But the gentleman from Tunstall.
Hi, I'm Nick Brown. I'm the Business Development Director for the South East region for Tunstall Healthcare.
Welcome. Appello.
Good evening. I'm John East. I'm Business Development Manager for Appello, covering the South.
Thank you very much. Hello there. And Buddy, I think it's the last one, isn't it?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Michael Davis. I'm a Sales Account Manager across the whole of the UK.
Lovely. Welcome.
Anisha Tedji, Democratic Services.
Sharon Day, Consultant in Public Health and Deputy Director of Public Health.
Dan Kennedy, Corporate Director.
Sasha Jeffries, Community Development Manager.
Darren Thorpe, Head of Business Delivery and Market Management for Social Care.
Thank you very much indeed. Welcome to everyone to this evening's meeting. So, carrying on from that then, apologies for absence to report the presence of any substitute members. Anisha.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received from Councillor Cooper and Councillor Rodriguez, with Councillor Tuckwell substituting. Apologies also received from Councillor Sweetin, with Councillor Farley substituting.
Thank you. And to receive the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of September, I move. Yeah. Are they agreed? Yeah. Thank you. And declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting, which I should have done before that, so my apologies. Any declarations of interest? There are none. Thank you. Then to confirm that the items for business marked Part 1 will be considered in public and items marked Part 2 will be considered in private. We're all Part 1 this evening, so that's all good. And then we come on to our first main agenda item, which is our major review into assistive living technologies. So just to set the ball rolling, we're at the stage now where we're hearing from providers of some of this technology and some of the equipment we've been hearing about, really to give us a bit more of a perspective as to what's out there and how it works, and really, I suppose, in terms of a vision of the future, to inform our thinking in terms of how we begin to start shaping potential recommendations to put to Cabinet. So that's essentially what we're doing. What we've set up is 3 sessions with each of the providers, 20 minutes in duration or thereabouts, and that's both for the presentation and for questions afterwards, if that's okay. I think, gentlemen, you've been prepared for that already. And I believe the order we're taking you in is Buddy first, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So without any further ado, and it's Michael Davis, isn't it? Yeah. Actually, can I stop you a second, Michael? Sorry, had the officers wanted to say anything at this point, or?
We were suggesting that we were speaking to Tonsil first, as we're currently using them.
Okay, that's fine. That's not the order I had them in, but I'm happy to do that. Okay. My apologies, Michael. If you can bear with us for a moment, we'll take Tonsil, with whom we already have a relationship and are familiar. So perhaps Tonsil can help us set the scene to begin with then. So can I ask Nick for you to go first, if you would, please?
All right, okay. I'm just going to try and share my screen. If you can let me know, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much for this opportunity. As you've already stated, you are to some degree already using our organisation to deliver some of your services. We feel that we've got a shared goal with you, in as much as we have a vision which is a world where people have freedom to live their life to the full in the place of their choice, and you're looking to put your residents first. So we're very much about making sure that people can stay at home for as long as possible. Quick update for those of you that don't know Tonsil. We're a 65-year-old company. We're based in the UK in Doncaster. We also manufacture our own equipment in the UK. The product that I think probably you're most familiar with at the moment is something called Smart Hub. Now, this is for people living in their own home and has the ability to connect to a response centre by one of two methods, either by a fixed landline or via a SIM card that's included within it. The traditional product was the one on the right, which is the Lifeline V. Smart Hub allows you to move across to the new digital age and transmit on digital rather than analogue phone lines. So it's got 24-hour battery backup. It's compatible with all of our existing sensors. So should you switch across to Smart Hub, you don't need to change any of the sensors within a resident's home, and it's totally compatible with those. It also can be updated over the air. So you can do remote unit updates, which again, very relevant, reduces the number of engineer visits, disruption to residents, and also in COVID times, keeps people safer. Sitting behind that, for the staff managing the system, we have something called Device Management Platform, which allows you to set up your stock automatically, create users, create templates, and actually you can scan using a QR code on the back of the devices to set them up before they go out, so they're ready to go as soon as you arrive on site. Again, reducing the time within a resident's property and making the whole replacement process a lot easier for people to do. Within this, there's also the Tonsil App, and this is what the operators can use to pre-program, set up, and make any additional sensors active. It's got a language choice, so it's not just available in English, it's available in multi-language. So community support solutions, I think this is probably the new area that we're moving into. So obviously we're in a post-pandemic world, and there is almost an avalanche of mental health issues that people are having to address on a daily basis. Many of them are struggling with the transition back to a society where you're out and about mixing with people. So one of the other issues, and this is data pre-pandemic and has only got worse, is the ability to get people home quickly from hospital and avoid backups into the NHS system. And again, particularly heading into winter, it's something of a significant consideration that people need to look at. A lot of this actually comes about waiting for care packages, waiting for community equipment, and what I'm going to go on and show you is a couple of solutions that you can give to people to get them monitored, from the moment they leave hospital. So one of these is a product called Tonsil Go. This is a wearable with a SIM card within it, which is active wherever somebody is in the community. So if they go into the local shop to buy a pint of milk and a newspaper, and they have an anxiety or panic attack or a fall, this unit will detect the fall. It also has two-way communication, which allows them to connect to a responder centre and an appropriate response to be sent out. It also has GPS tracking within it, so when the person pushes the button, you know where they are. So if you've got somebody with early stage dementia who maybe hasn't been out of their house very much in the last 18 months, gets lost, they can hit the button and you can go and find them and retrieve them and support them. And it's kind of like an arm round their shoulder when they're moving back into a community. The other version of that sits actually as an app on a phone. This can have daily scheduled calls, and they just hit the button, say that they're okay, or they can hit the red button if they need somebody to come and help them straight away. Again, it's a reassurance tool to help people moving back out into the community that may feel unsure about leaving their home. They're used to having their button, their box at home, but this now allows them to take that out into the community and wherever they go. And there's lots of evidence to show that interaction in a social environment with other people has fantastic benefits for both mental and physical health. The other thing that we also have, which may be of interest to integrate with your North West London integrated care system, is we also have telehealth available for monitoring patients at home with long-term conditions, things like COPD, heart failure, and actually we've been using this quite significantly with eating disorders as well. And it allows you to collect data, both vital signs, so blood pressure, that kind, pulse oximetry, but also soft signs through questionnaires, and then it then triages that and refers it to a central point where doctors or nurses can assess it and make early intervention to prevent deterioration. We also have some group living solutions. I know you're going through a group living upgrade across your estate at the moment. Again, it's offering the similar kind of reassurance for people living in group living environments. The other thing that we can offer to support you and support your residents is the knowledge that we've got more than 120 regionally based service and maintenance engineers. So we have our own service and maintenance, which, depending on what program you sign up to, some of them will respond 24 hours. So you can get people who have some kind of failure, equipment failure or damage, back online and reassured that they're being monitored very quickly. And as I said, we can control the quality of that because they all work for us and they all go through the standard training programs. The future of care we see is moving into something that we call cognitive care, and we are on this journey with various modules that attach to our monitoring products. At the moment, most councils sit in the reactive, so somebody pushes a button and then they go to help. Some are already at the proactive using telecare sensors, outbound calling and proactive services, and we're doing this extensively in Spain and the Nordics, and combining it with predictive, which is monitoring from some of the health peripherals and activity peripherals to work out when somebody is becoming more frail or their health is deteriorating, so input can go in before they become a critical incident. And ultimately, we see the combination of both the health stuff that we have and also the social care stuff giving you the ability in the future to deliver something that we call cognitive care, where you use all of the data sets to ensure that people actually live their best and most successful life back in the community for as long as possible. So overall, we're on a mission which we hope aligns with your vision, which is to use data-driven technology to improve customers' ability to deliver new and more efficient and effective models for health and care management in a community setting. So that's a really quick overview. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Nick, let's see what question we've got from some colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nick. Obviously, data is obviously a very big piece and a big part of this. I was just concerned about who holds the data, where it goes, what kind of data is being collected, obviously GDPR and this sort of thing. Obviously, just thinking about insurance, healthcare insurance. Is this data being shared with other third parties? I mean, who's holding this data? Where is it being kept? That sort of thing. I'd like a bit more information about that, please.
Okay, so all of the data sets are secure. We don't share any data, and any data that belongs to you that we hold in our so we have our own response monitoring platform. So if we're offering response to you at the termination of any contract, that is destroyed and or returned to you, whichever is your preference. So we don't hold any data other than that is necessary for us to be able to carry out the services that you require. So the majority of our things, you've got multiple security layers to log on to. So yeah, it is all on very secure servers, and yeah, we would never share that data out to anyone other than the people that need it to be able to deliver a service.
Thank you for that. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Nick. The question I'm going to ask, I will ask of all witnesses, so you have notice right now. But what would you say is the biggest challenge, the biggest obstacle facing assisted living technologies, and how are you working to kind of overcome them? Is there a particular a group of people or a particular illness or condition that really does make it difficult to overcome, or any kind of priorities around those challenges?
I don't think there's one in particular. I think, as I touched on earlier, I think there is a particular issue around mental health post-lockdown. We've spent a year and a half telling people if you go outside and walk to the end of the road, you'll die of a virus. And there's so much data that actually aligns to the fact that social isolation and lack of physical and mental activity outside of the home leads to really poor quality outcomes for the individuals concerned. So I think there's certainly a space there, which is why we're particularly focusing on the Tonsil Go and the Connect app to allow people to have that security blanket and hopefully get them to return as quickly as possible. I know lots of people are nervous. I've got an elderly mother that lives on her own, and she's still struggling with the idea of going to the supermarket. My son's extremely clinically vulnerable, and he was absolutely terrified at the concept of going back to college. So I think mental health is there. Obviously, we have a growing elderly population, so things like heart failure, COPD, and dementia are just going to be a growing number going forward. For me, the single biggest challenge is that integration between health and social care, because quite often the guys only arrive at your door. You don't find Dave before Dave finds you. So I think there is absolutely a piece about using data on 40 and 50-year-olds who've got long-term conditions now, and being able to get early intervention in place to make sure that they can stay at home as long as possible and live as full a life as possible.
Thanks, Nick. I've a couple of questions from me then. One of the things that our witnesses tell us thus far in other sessions is that there can be awareness of technology among some of our service users, some of their families, and I'm just wondering how, given the talk of apps and various other things, I wonder how you're approaching that in your approach to service to product development. That's one question. My second one is I'm very interested in the what you said about what sounds to me like discharge to assess. So hospital discharges, making them work, and also those who are prone to falls, and obviously the impact that has on hospitalisation and admissions, which is a big problem for us. So just could you say a little bit more about those things, please?
Sure. So the first thing, wariness about technology. I totally get what you're saying, and I think it's actually something that has declined over the pandemic. For instance, we're all sat on a Zoom meeting, and I can't imagine that would have happened 2 years ago. So I think the vast majority of people have become far more familiar with the idea of using mobile devices, but I completely take it on board. And that's one of the reasons the Tonsil Go product sits there. So you've got a choice. If you're a comfortable mobile phone user that's using a smartphone, you can do that. If you don't want to do that, you can use the Tonsil Go, and that's one of the reasons we don't have live tracking on Tonsil Go. We could put it on there, so it's a capability within the device, but it's not currently supplied in a format that uses that. And that's about the fact that actually someone might not want you to know that you've gone to the pub or you've gone to the betting shop. So that's giving the user of the tech the choice as to whether or not they're tracked, and that's why it only gives you your location when you push the button. So I think you're absolutely right. There's loads of stuff we could do, and my mum's a really great example. I would like her to have some tech in her house, but she actually doesn't want anyone watching her. So that's why I think there's still a place for the traditional button and a box on the wall where they push the button when they want help, and they're not being monitored 24/7. And I think that's down to personal choice. The other bit about discharge to assess, one of the real challenges is actually getting that tech into people's houses as quickly as you want it to be there. And there's a lot of people that spend time sat in hospital beds who would much sooner be at home. And that is one of the things you could do with Tonsil Go. It's not a perfect solution. It's not the same as having your CO2, your flood monitors, your aneurysis monitors, your epilepsy. But what it does mean is that if those people really do want to get out of hospital and you need to free the beds, you can do that quicker, and they can feel protected while you get the full shield in place. And I'm sorry, I forgot your third question.
I'm simply asking about elderly people prone to falls, and you touched on that, I think. So perhaps a bit on that briefly, please.
Yeah. So the Tonsil Go has falls within it. We also have a pendant called the Vivi, which again also is an alternative to which works with the box on the wall. So it has independent fall detection within it, as well as the capacity for you to push the button if you've had a fall. Because there is a tendency with elderly people. Outside of my day job, I'm a first responder, and we were warned straight away that elderly people will not call for help when they want it, because they don't want to be a nuisance. So automatic fall detection in the Vivi is something that will alert the responders that something has happened, irrespective of whether the individual pushes the button. Because quite often they'll wait on the floor for a couple of hours, hoping someone's going to come and find them before they get round to actually pushing the button. And within the Vivi we have fall detection that will trigger that and will alert the responder to be able to call in. And if they don't get a response, then they can dispatch the appropriate services to go and check on the resident.
Nick, thank you for that. I've got one last question, and this is the one I'll ask to all three of you, and that's really around future-proofing. Now, clearly in local government, our resources are finite, our ability to invest, there's a limit to that, and clearly we, in making decisions of the sort that we'll make in the future, we want to make sure that technology doesn't outpace us in a way that works against us in terms of how we invest. I just wonder what your approach to future-proofing is in your approach to product development.
So we at the moment are sitting on some digital technology that we haven't pushed out the door because we're still doing further testing on it. I think there's been a degree of kind of panic about the switch to digital phone lines in 2025. It doesn't mean that all analog technology will stop working. And actually, we would discourage you from the idea of thinking you have to bin everything that you've got. You know, we've got a lot of our kit that's 20 years old that's still out there and working. There are interim solutions. So we have something called an IP converter, which will allow you to convert schemes with analog systems within them to a digital outgoing call. And I think it's prudent to start thinking about it now because you don't want to be budgeting for everything in 2024, 25. But at the same time, I don't think it's the time to absolutely rush to digital technology. A lot of the alarm receiving centres aren't even capable of taking incoming digital calls. So you're going to have a hybrid for a while before you go full digital. And I think on top of that, we're thinking in the terms of the first electric car, really, that came out, or the hybrid, was the Sinclair C5. Now, if you'd have rushed and bought those, you'd feel pretty stupid if you looked at a Tesla right now. So we're keen that when we bring stuff to the market, and we've got a whole product schedule coming through over the next year to 18 months of digital products that will be solely digital, that they will be Teslas rather than Sinclair C5s. And I think the other thing that we're really conscious of is that, in all honesty, digital home monitoring is not going to be as robust as existing analog technologies are. And some of that's down to the fact we're putting battery backup and SIM backup, but if you actually look at it, mobile phone masts only have probably about an hour of battery auxiliary power backup. The routers that will be put in, again, will have significant battery backup, but the green boxes that you see the BT guys in that are full of wires, they only have 1 to 2 hours of battery backup. So there is going to be an absolute that needs to be considered that however robust the call coming out of a property is going to be, the networks that are attached to it right now, if you had a 3-hour power outage, would probably go down and you'd be left without the ability to make calls out. So we're looking at a range of technology solutions that will cover that off.
Nick, thank you very much indeed for that. I'm looking around the room. Any questions from colleagues at all? No, I think we've covered the ground. Okay, Nick, well, can I... No one's indicating? I do beg you. Sasha's indicating.
Hi, Nick. Can I just ask about protocols? I think in the past, Council have had closed protocols. Is that something you're looking at in the future?
Right. So we've never had fully closed protocols. It's one of the things that people believe about our tech. But our digital, we're looking at all the appropriate ones, be it Scape or be it Senelec.
So I'm just going to butt in there. Are we all comfortable with the term closed protocols? So, would you like to just expand on that briefly?
It's just about whether the equipment is compatible with other types of equipment so that you're not stuck with just having to use one particular piece of kit.
Thanks for that.
So carry on, Nick.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely, we are in that space, and I think I'm looking at John on the left-hand side of my screen. I mean, you know, we know that we're testing our kit with other suppliers because, yeah, the days when you could have a system that only works with you know, your platform or only works with your sensors is long gone. So yeah, we have open IP attached to our devices. So yeah, I think that's something that, yeah, historically we've been accused of, although we've actually predominantly it's because nobody's ever asked us to attach to the kit. So yeah, we are more than happy to do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. Doesn't seem to be anything further. So, Nick, thank you very much for that. Thanks for getting the ball rolling very nicely. It's provoked some thoughts, no doubt, for others, but thank you very much indeed. See you again soon. Thank you. Right, I'm looking at Sasha. We'll go to Buddy now then. John, if you'd like to make a start, please.
Okay, I'll just get that now.
Sorry, Michael, I do beg your pardon. Did I call you John? My apologies.
You did.
It's all right. Sorry, is that through you?
All right. Can you see that? Yes. Okay, perfect. So as mentioned earlier, I'm Michael and I am a sales account manager from Buddy. Just a quick bit about Buddy. It was founded in 2004 by our CEO, Sarah Murray. The initial idea actually came from when she was in the supermarket with her daughter and her daughter went missing. So we actually started on like a child protection device and forward up until 2021, we've got a lot more products since then. The first one I'm going to speak about is the Buddy Mini. The Buddy Mini is a simple GPS location device. You give it to someone when they're out and about and you'll be able to track their location. It's about the size of a matchbox, so it can fit on a normal set of keys. You're able to view all historic GPS data. It's constantly recording a GPS fix. So you can go back and see where your mum was yesterday, the day before, etc. You're able to set safe and unsafe zones. An example of a safe zone would be if someone was leaving the house at night and they shouldn't be, you are able to set a zone around the house. You can also customize the times and the days, and it will alert someone if they were to leave the zone. And an unsafe zone is just the opposite of that. So if there's somewhere the device is not meant to go into, the chosen contacts will be alerted when the device has entered that zone. It's all personalised to the client. You can add any details you want, key safe locations, key safe numbers, hair, medical conditions, medicine taken. Just in case any alert does go off, we have all the information present to the monitoring centre in case emergency services, for example, needed to be called. It's all recorded via our secure web app and portal. On the actual app itself, it's just you can see the last known GPS location of the device. And on the secure web portal, you have a lot more details where you can view the historical GPS data and the personal details of the client. The Buddy Mini has about a 24-hour battery life, depending on usage, and it requires about an hour's charge a day. There is an option for an RF beacon. This is usually when the client is at home. For example, a GPS device will need to be in range of GPS satellites to get an accurate GPS fix. But at home, obviously you're inside a building, so you're able to use an RF beacon, and that essentially just lets you know that I'm in range of this beacon, which means I'm at home, and it also saves on the battery life of the device itself. It comes with its own 3G EU roaming SIM, so connect to the strongest network in the area. It's impact resistant. I wouldn't recommend smashing it with a hammer, which maybe the picture shows, but if any wear and tear and drops, it will be absolutely fine. And it's all monitored by our TSA accredited gold standard 24/7 monitoring centre. Moving on to the Buddy Clip. The Buddy Clip just on the left is also a GPS location device, but it also brings in a few extra features which I'll get onto. Again, you're able to view all the historical GPS data just as the Buddy Mini. And again, you can set safe and unsafe zones exactly the same as before. However, this Buddy Clip gives you the additional feature of a panic button, which also has two-way audio. So if someone presses both buttons either side, there's just, you can see in the picture, they go straight through to the monitoring centre and they'll be able to communicate with them and get the help they need. This again is all personalised to the client, and that's done via the secure web portal, and you also have use of the app, as mentioned before, with the Buddy Mini. Again, this one has a 24-hour battery life and needs to be charged for about an hour a day. Again, with the option to add an RF beacon if needed at home. It also has its own 3G EU roaming SIM, and it's also monitored by our 24/7 alert monitoring centre. Moving on to the Buddy Clip and Wristband, you'll notice in the picture it's exactly the same clip as before with the additional feature of a wristband. So due to it being the same clip, It is a GPS locator, and that's done via the clip itself. You can view the historical GPS data, set safe and unsafe zones, as the panic buttons, which are on the clip, and there are also on the wristband, which is just either side of the watch face, so above and below the buddy logo. So you can press either the wristband or the clip itself. And you also have the additional feature of the wristband being a full detection wristband. It has its own accelerometer in it, so any fast change in movement or sudden impact is enough to trigger the alert. The wristband is fully waterproof up to an IP67 grade, which means you can have it underwater for about half an hour up to meters deep. So any showering or bathing at home, you don't have to take it off. It's designed to be worn all the time. Again, this is all personalised to the client, and that's all done through the secure web-based portal. The clip has a 24-hour battery life, as mentioned before, and the wristband has a 7-day battery life. Again, an RF beacon is available with this option, and it's, again, monitored by our 24/7 alert monitoring centre. Moving on to the final product is the Buddy Hub. This is our home-based solution, so it cannot be taken outside of the house. It is just for use inside the house. There's no landline or Wi-Fi required, as it has its own 3G roaming SIM in it, in the actual hub itself, which is just the white box with the digital analog clock on it there. There's no on-site installation required. It can be set up prior to dispatch, and all the client will need to do is just open the box, plug it in, and charge the wristband up. There's a panic button. Again, this is on the wristband, so just above and below the Buddy logo. And the wristband, again, is a full detection wristband with two-way audio for those alerts via the hub. The wristband is, again, waterproof, and that's all recorded via the secure web-based portal. The wristband has a 7-day battery life, as mentioned before. The hub is designed to be plugged into the mains at all times, but for whatever reason, such as a power cut, it does have a 48-hour battery backup. That's just in case. It has a 3-phase power alert, which can be set up and customised. The first one is when it's initially unplugged, you can be notified. The second phase alert is when it hits 40%, and the final one is a no communication. It's when the hub has not communicated for an hour. So you have like a 3-phase alert system there. And again, that is monitored by our 24/7 alert monitoring centre. I do just have a few quick case studies. The first one is cost prevention. The average residential cost is about £600 to £1,500 a week, and the Buddy Mini costs about £1 a day. So straight away, that's a saving of about £30,000 a year per client just from using a Buddy Mini. Moving on to the next one, this was more travel training. So they will have a GPS device with them, and this gave them the independence and confidence they need to go outside by themselves, being reassured that if anything did go wrong, help is just a push of a button away. The final one is dementia and falls risks, and this basically allowed someone to live independently within their own home, managing the risks around seizures, and falls. And it basically just gave them the confidence to live independently and keep them out of a care home for as long as they can. So that is a thank you from me. All my details are there if anyone did need to contact me as well. But that is me finished.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. What questions have we got? Councillor Prince.
Am I right in hearing that the Buddy Mini's got a 24-hour battery life?
Yes,
because that doesn't
correct.
seem very long at all, especially when people who may be using them aren't very good at remembering to charge such things. I'm just wondering whether you recognise that as a potential obstacle, and I suppose what your response to that is.
So with all of our devices, there are a few additional alerts you can set up. So there is a low battery alert you can set up, and the percentage of when that alert triggers is also customisable. So if someone won't remember to charge the battery, you can set their carers to get the notification. You can set family members, and there's also a no communication alert, as I mentioned before, with the hub, and that's if the device hasn't communicated, which will prompt potentially the family members to go and assist.
Councillor Mcconnell.
Yeah, thank you. My question is also about the Buddy Mini. I just want to understand that does a service user need to carry that device with them, and what happens if they're not carrying that device with them?
So with our device, it does require the user to carry it with them. We have got people quite creative with how the client will remember, if that's as simple as attaching it to a set of keys. We actually had one carer who would sellotape it to a Zimmer frame, and that means when they leave the house they would bring the Buddy Mini with them. But our device does require the user, for the Buddy Mini, to carry the device when they leave the house.
Okay, Councillor Haggard, please.
Yes, thank you. I was just a little bit worried how we identify these. So I think all situations are possible with people. And if we had 3 people in the room that all had one, how would we know that one wouldn't get confused with someone else's? And then all of a sudden, all those details of the person that they aren't, if that makes sense. So I think what I'm trying to say is, are they ID numbers? Are they easily? Can we know whose is who? Thank you.
Yeah, so they are ID numbered. The number is literally just on the back of the device. If you have the clip as well, there are a few different colours you can get, which may help you differentiate which person has which device, but they are all have their own individual ID number just on the back.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michael. Again, back to the data question again, but also just sort of reassurance about what happens with the data you're holding and you know, after what period of time it's deleted and so forth. But also the strap one that goes around the wrist clip.
Yeah.
Is that recording other information, or is that like you're a smartwatch or anything? Is it recording, like heart rate and that sort of business? Does it have the capability to monitor sort of other health conditions that they might be experiencing, like if they're on the verge of a heart attack or something like that? It could alert people to that sort of thing.
So the wristband we have currently is just the fall detection, but it also does have an activity monitor where it will records steps. So if someone is active in the night, it would record how active they were. But at the minute, it doesn't have a heartbeat sensor or anything like that on it.
So, and in terms of the data question as well, I'd like to sort of ask
sorry.
as well. Thank you.
So it's all recorded via a secure web-based portal. Everyone set up their own login details with a 4-digit security PIN. If you don't have access to view a certain client, we wouldn't give any. So a family member would have to have access to view the data themselves before we can release any information. And it's the same system we use with our police forces as well. It's very strict on you need to have access yourself, and we would only talk about something which this person could actively view themselves if they were to log on.
Okay.
And just in terms of holding the length of time you hold the data for, like we've just heard with Tonsil, they delete it. What happens with the data you're holding? Does that delete after a certain period of time, or the end of a contract, that sort of thing? Thank you.
Yeah, so the data would also get removed as soon as the client stops using the device for whatever reason. The profile's archived and then it's gone.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Michael. Just on all of the products you presented this evening, you mentioned there was GPS tracking. Does the client have the ability to disable that if they don't want to be tracked and just activate it in the event of an emergency?
With our GPS devices, they are tracking the whole time with their 3G roaming SIM in it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking around the room. A couple of questions from me then, Michael. My question about future-proofing I'll put to you as well, that you heard earlier. I'll repeat it if you like, but time is short. What's your approach to that, given that resources are finite? I echo the point about charging. That came up at Parkview when we were there back in August, so that's a relevant consideration, I think. I would thank you for citing a couple of examples of other local authorities where you're working. We have been looking for exemplars. We're struggling a little bit with that, so no doubt we can look at that more fully and see if there's anything we can learn from it as part of this process. But for now, if I can just ask you about future-proofing, please, if you would.
Yeah, so we are constantly working to improve our devices. We believe, especially the hub at the minute, it is very future-proof. Along with our Clip and our Buddy Mini, they've been going for a long time. And we always take customers' feedback on top. We do have a few things in the works regarding the Buddy Hub, but our devices so far have tested the tail of time, and they are still going strong. You do have the option for insurance as well, so if they do break, you are able to get a replacement, but they are designed to last for as long as possible.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. I'm looking around the room again before I draw this particular one to a close. Thank you very much, Michael, for adding to our understanding in this area. Thank you, that's very useful. Thank you. And if I can finally come to John from Appello, if you would please, John.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, you should have my presentation screen there. Great stuff. So I'd like to take you through the end-to-end solutions that Appello can provide, very much with the digital transition in mind, and also just to point out some of the benefits that your residents will actually see from some of this technology. So a little brief introduction of Appello. So we've been around for around 30 years in this market, and within the last 5 years we've very much focused on fully digital solutions. So we don't produce any analog equipment anymore. Everything is digital, and the whole business is built end to end around digital equipment. We have, as I say, end-to-end solutions. So we have a monitoring platform and our own monitoring centre, which looks after around 250,000 customers. We do have calls coming in that are analogue. So we have a platform that is a digital platform with an analogue gateway, so that we can take in all sorts of calls. Once we get to the point where everything goes digital, we will then remove that analogue gateway, and it will be a fully digital system. And that's a little way off. The actual platform itself has won awards, and it won the Best Use of Technology UK Contact Centre Forum Awards a couple of years ago, and that was quite a coup, because we were up against some very stiff opposition, not just within our marketplace. The platform has handled more end-to-end digital calls than anything else out there, and we currently support around about 20,000 residents using a fully digital alarm system in sheltered accommodation. The main system that I'm going to show you is our Smart Living Solutions, which is our wired system for sheltered accommodation and extra care. And that again is fully end-to-end digital, like everything we do. Where we've had a lot of customer involvement, we've had surveys, and the feedback we've had I'll go through with you a little bit later on, but it really has shown some great benefits for the end users. We also have a range of cloud services which can support residents and systems. I'm going to show you a little video shortly just to give you an idea of what one of those services is, and it's Digital Bridge, and what we do with that, we mitigate the circumstances where you may get a failed analogue call by converting it to a digital signal, but the video explains it a lot better than I would. So this is the reasons that we're doing what we're doing with digital. So all of the network providers out there are advising for organisations like yourselves to switch to digital now. I've been on some of the sessions with the providers, and they're absolutely adamant that switching to digital now is the thing to do. we have got a bit of a storm coming, and we are seeing call failures now, and that's only going to get worse as the network goes fully digital. So I'm going to show you a little video now which will back that up with a little bit of information, and I'll see you on the other side of that when it plays.
Apello Digital Bridge is an intelligent protocol conversion solution in the Apello cloud. As the UK's telecoms infrastructure moves from analogue to digital, some are not in a position to embrace the benefits of a complete digital transition. Apello Digital Bridge is the answer. Analysis shows that as many as 1 in 10 analogue calls are impacted by the digital upgrade, and this is increasing as more of the network turns digital. When a telecare call leaves the home, it travels across many different telecoms networks before reaching the monitoring centre. It doesn't matter if that monitoring centre is in the next street. It could still travel across multiple networks all over the country, finding the quickest and most cost-effective routes. As a result, there is a significant chance that an analogue call will touch a digital part of the network. The digital part of the network can misread the analog's packet of information, resulting in a failed call. The solution is to bridge your transition from analog to digital with Apello Digital Bridge. Early in its journey, the telecare call is diverted to the Apello cloud. Apello Digital Bridge identifies the analog call protocol and its destination. The call is translated to the required digital protocol and diverted back from the Apello cloud to the telecoms network, continuing its journey to the monitoring centre. Apello Digital Bridge can convert a range of analog protocols and output to several different digital protocols. It is a clever but simple solution to enhance customer safety and mitigate the risk of first-time call failures, whilst housing providers finalise their plans for transitioning to more advanced digital technology-enabled care.
So I hope that helped a little bit just to explain reasons behind it again as to what's happening. This is something that we're using now, and it really works. It's just a fantastic service. So around that, back onto the monitoring platform. So the digital platform we have, it's using all of the industry standard signalling protocols, analog and digital. And I won't go into a whole load of detail here, but it has some very important features which helps with residents, and that's things like the supervisors are able to listen into calls so that they can help when help's required with an operator, and they can even coach in their ear so they can sort of assist them with helping somebody who might be having a difficult time, and if necessary they can actually take over that call and make sure that the resident's safe. I mentioned earlier about the awards. So the CareNet platform that we use and have developed was awarded gold for best use of innovation, and I think it was Sainsbury's that was second in that. So as I say, there were some quite big players in there that we beat. So I'm now going to move on to Smart Living Solutions, which I will refer to as SLS from now on. And this is our system that we're using in sheltered extra care housing. And if you look at the image there, on the left is probably what you have in most of your schemes, or something similar. And on the right is the type of thing that we're looking at with SLS. So it's very different, not only in the way it looks, it's very much enhancing the living experience of residents, and that's the whole idea behind it. So it's designed to meet all of the current standards, so it's a safe system for your residents. It's 100% digital, as with everything else we do, and that means that when somebody pulls a cord or presses their pendant, the call will actually get through to the monitoring centre in around about 3 seconds. So I don't know if you've ever heard of people reporting that they've been waiting for ages and ages for the call to go through, but this really does help with that, and it really provides a really quick response. Because we're using digital over digital network, the speech quality is superb as well as the speed. We're using a broadband connection, so we're completely avoiding the telephony network, so that there's no worries about that. It's a secure system, so as well as having the broadband connection, we also have a backup SIM card within the system. So if the line did go down, it will automatically switch over to the SIM, and the system carries on as it was. And whether it's working on the SIM off-site or whether it's on-site with the site manager, we can have multiple calls being handled at the same time. And in theory, it's an unlimited number. So you could have everybody pressing their pendant and having their call handled. And that could mean that you have door entry calls going on, you have a call to the on-site manager, and multiple calls off-site to the monitoring centre, and they can all be handled at the same time. So there's none of this waiting and queuing for calls, so very, very safe. The protocols we're using, as I say, are the industry standard digital protocols, and we're tested and working with majority of monitoring centres out there. And if it is a centre that hasn't been updated to digital, we can use the digital bridge. So we can actually convert a digital signal back to an analogue signal and deliver it directly into the monitoring centre. So again, it avoids the telephony network, but delivers it directly into the monitoring centre. Added functions that we have with the room unit itself, it can work as a Wi-Fi hotspot, which means that residents can then have some sort of digital inclusion, and they can then use their own device, perhaps for email, light web browsing, messaging and so on. And we also have Bluetooth connections, so we can have extension speakers, so that anybody that can't get up and go to the unit or can't hear particularly well, they can have a speaker next to them on the sofa or in the bedroom, and they can still use the system and still hear if they get a door call and so on. We have remote door controllers, so you can answer a call and release the front door for a door entry call, and those calls would be in video as well. And there's nothing out there using fully digital quite like SLSs, and we'd be more than happy to show you some if you'd like to come out and see one. So the difference is really with having a fully digital system. As I said, we're not using the telephony network as such, we're using a proper internet broadband connection. We're not trying to make it a square peg fitting in a round hole. The speed of connection, as I said, is very, very quick. So 3 seconds is a lot better than almost 2 minutes when you're laying on the floor. And as well as the digital inclusion, we also have video calling from resident to resident on the system, which was one of the real benefits during the COVID with lockdowns and so on. We were able to keep the social inclusion for people that may not have seen anybody for months on end, and I'll go into that a little bit later on.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you, John? Can you start to come to a conclusion, please? All very good so far, but time is of the essence, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll just skip through some of that. The slides will be available afterwards, no problem at all. So on-site equipment would be fairly similar to what you'd have as a like for like. And then some of the additional bits we have is an app that we can link the user's device, so a tablet or a smartphone, and they can then take some of that functionality of their room unit either into another room, so they can answer video door calls on a tablet, or they could use it when they're out and about using a smartphone. So again, it makes it very portable. The other bits I've mentioned. We have a HQ app for staff to keep an eye on the system, so they can monitor the state of devices. They've got a log of calls and so on. And there's a huge range of additional add-ons that you can have to support individuals, such as fall detectors and so on. And we're looking to be interoperable with other manufacturers so that we can use all sorts of different devices so that you can choose what suits the resident best. And as far as residents, these are the sort of numbers that we've had on our feedback. So very high percentages, but the main ones really being that 89% of residents feel safer being able to see who's calling at their main door. During COVID, as I said, we had resident-to-resident communication, and the usage of the video calls was up by 192%, which just shows that we can have older people using technology quite well, and especially if it's a benefit to them. And to back that up, only last week, Appello and Housing 21 were awarded winners for best use of technology in seniors housing, for exactly those reasons. So the case study was all around the benefits to the residents. Part of our cloud services is we can also integrate with other devices, Fitbits and telehealth and so on. And what we do, we take readings from those devices to produce a welfare score. And if somebody goes below their welfare score, then that will alert somebody, a carer or a family member, so they might want to make a quick phone call. We have a lower level system, which is again fully digital. I shall skip over that one with the technicalities. And we're also now releasing our digital smart life unit, which is for individuals in their own homes. Again, all fully digital and interoperable with other manufacturers' devices, so you can choose which of those devices you want to use with the residents. And all of the speed and all the digital benefits are all there as well.
John, thank you very much for that. I'm going to, can we treat this up? You're just about done, so thank you very much indeed for that. That's great, and thank you for that presentation. Just going to step in there. Thank you very much. What question have we got? Councillor Prince, Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. This digital switchover is news to me. I just got a bit confused partway through. The video was about telephone exchanges, then you were talking about broadband. I'm a little bit confused as to which is which and what's what, and could you just sort of clarify, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So this is something that's been within industry for 3 years or so, but it's not really come out in the public awareness at the moment, but it's about to. All of our UK telephony networks are effectively end-to-end copper wire going into street boxes and exchanges. That's all changing, and we're going to a digital voice over IP internet provider, which means that a lot of that copper wire will disappear, and our calls are going to be effectively digitised, packet switched, and flung over the internet and reassembled at the other end. Now, as far as making a phone call with a normal telephone and voice, our brains won't really see any difference at all. But when we're sending a complex tone-based protocol to identify what equipment's calling a monitoring centre, that signal is very easily corrupted. And that's really where all this digital drive is coming from.
Okay, happy with that. Thank you, John. Councillor Tuckwell?
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and thank you for your presentation this evening. I think with all of the devices we've seen this evening, the key element is being able to respond to any given situation. And you've mentioned quite a few times in your piece there around a 3-second response time. I'm just wondering how are you managing that? I mean, as your client base grows, what are you doing to ensure that is something which actually happens?
So this is the actual equipment connection time. So that won't change. It doesn't matter how many people using systems. It is purely from when somebody initiates the call, because we are using digital communications over an internet connection. It's almost instant. So that's not saying that somebody will answer that call and say, "Hello, John, how are you?" in 3 seconds. But if there are people there to answer those calls, they will be presented with them within 3 seconds of the person pressing the button.
Councillor Tuckwell, please follow up.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but are you saying then that there's just going to be an indication within 3 seconds, but have you got the capability to be able to deal with an emergency more or less instantaneously? Or is it just going to be held in a queue waiting for an operative to answer whatever the emergency is?
It doesn't mean that we'll be answering the calls necessarily. So we can point the calls at whichever monitoring centre you're using at the time. So as far as ours, we staff it accordingly so that we handle calls as they come in based on historical information, and we staff accordingly. So we think we pretty much have the right number of people on seats to answer the calls swiftly, and I can't speak for other monitoring centres out there up and down the country.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I can't see anyone else indicating. I've got a couple of quick questions. First of all, can you confirm that you mentioned Chelmsford, because we'll follow up on that outside the meeting, I think, given time. And just a future-proofing question, please, if you would. And that's it for me.
Yeah. So everything we do is fully digital, designed from ground up. We're using all of the standard digital protocols, and the infrastructure that the systems go in is all structured cabling on a Cat5e or Cat6 cable. So it is already there, future-proofed and ready to move on as and when required.
Thank you very much indeed, John, for that. I'm looking around the room and no one else is indicating. So with that, let me thank Nick, Michael and John for your presentations and for taking questions. It certainly illuminated the subject somewhat for me, and I'm sure my colleagues will be reflecting on this moving forward. But let me thank all three of you for your input there. In terms of the item as a whole now, I suppose just to kind of draw together the discussion, as we were saying earlier, we've got a November meeting during the course of which we will start to look at our findings from today and our previous witness sessions. What Darren's done is he's circulated an updated review activity sheet that was emailed to us earlier today, and we've got also a hard copy in front of us. So what's included within that is a possible supplementary demonstration from, I think we've got Grand Care there to be arranged to provide further examples. So I think we can look at that, and perhaps a bit of a mop-up session around the scoping report that we had, and the extent to which we've covered off the bits that we wanted to cover. So that's kind of where we are. And that's really it, really. If anyone wants to add anything on this item, we will move on. No one's indicating. So thank you very much. The recommendation, I think, is just that we hear the evidence. We've done that, and we will go away and digest. But gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, you too. Thank you. Right, okay, thanks for your input on that. That was a useful discussion, I think. We now come to agenda item 6, which is the Better Care Fund scheme for people with learning disabilities. Takes me back a bit, this, Gary and Jane and Kate, to my Health and Wellbeing Board. Thank you, Darren, and thank you, Sasha, very much indeed. Takes me back a bit. It's good to be talking about the Better Care Fund again and how it's working in the context of LD. I'll say no more for now, but hand over to you to present to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's not my intention to go step by step through the report because obviously people will have had it and been able to read through it. Just to give a bit of context, the report is very much focused on adults with learning disability. That's in part because we have recently had the full review into autism. And in terms of Better Care Fund, that's very much being seen in terms of the wider transformation programme for LD, autism and mental health. The report does give some background in terms of the definition of learning disability and likely impacts, just to help understand what would and wouldn't be covered in a report of this nature. In section 7, you'll see there are some figures around prevalence of learning disability. You'll see that the PANSI figures and the GP registered figures are quite different. That's not entirely unexpected. People may or may not choose to register on the Learning Disability GP register, and many people with low-level learning disabilities may not be coming to the attention of services or feel the need to be included in the GP register. In terms of section 10, there's an outline of the statutory services there that are commissioned by the Council. So the report covers both the work of the Council's Learning Disabilities Adult Social Work teams and CNWL's LD Health team. Table 1 are the services that are commissioned by the Council. So these are adults with learning disabilities that are meeting the threshold for services under the Care Act, and there's a breakdown there. In terms of looking over recent activity, clearly the pandemic has impacted on adults with learning disabilities as it has other residents. In terms of achievements, throughout the pandemic, contact calls were made to people with learning disabilities and their carers, so additional contact time was undertaken virtually. We've had good performance on vaccination in terms of people with learning disabilities having their vaccinations. There's been a new learning disabilities liaison nurse role at the hospital, which we've had very positive feedback about. So that individual helps people who are admitted to hospital and ensures their needs are considered through their hospital stay. There are complex care panels that meet weekly, so this is a joint venture between health and social care, very much focused on the sort of more complex needs and trying to prevent admission to hospital for this cohort of people. There are clinical needs in primary care that have been developed, and the work of the positive behaviour support team is very much critical to a number of these initiatives, so they're very much part of those integrated teams that we talk about, and continue working across the piece really. Throughout the pandemic, the learning disabilities care homes within the council have continued to operate and to support their residents. As I say, it has been challenging. There are a number of challenges faced with people with learning disabilities, their carers, their families, and the health and social care system that supports them. So there have been issues around isolation. As I say, we have done contact calls, but people have been, for example, unable to attend daycare or unable to attend college or their usual day opportunities, and that has been difficult for some people to adapt to, or other people and for others to understand. Supporting carers has been obviously very challenging, and that continues to be a high priority. We are currently dealing with the issues arising from the mandatory vaccination of care home staff, which might well be extended to the broader care market in the future. And there are funding issues in terms of, for example, financial assistance meeting infection control, and which has been met in part by the Meeting Infection Control and Testing Fund. In terms of the priorities, learning disabilities, learning disability, mental health and autism is a priority for the joint health and wellbeing strategy. The work is being monitored through the Mental Health, Learning Disabilities and Autism Transformation Board. There is ongoing work around COVID-19 vaccination for people with learning disabilities and or autism. It is intended that we will be offering the boosters from mid-November onwards, because that will align with the 6-month period for the boosters. Within the report, it details that there was quite a sort of major piece of work in terms of supported living for people with learning disabilities over the last couple of years, and that will be fully implemented going forward. And there is an ongoing focus on annual health checks for people with learning disabilities. You will see there is some performance figures and benchmarking included in the pack. Which brings us on to performance. Yes, we've got the annual health checks. We've got health action plans and how we are performing. So this details how people's health needs will be met. There are, people may be familiar with something called the LEDA review, so Learning Disability Mortality Review Programmes. So any death of a person with a learning disability will be reported through the LEDA process, and there are various thresholds in terms of the investigations that follow, and that's around learning from learning disability deaths and whether there's anything we can do to improve, for example, equal access to treatment and care and support. There's some performance details there around LD deaths as reported through LEDA. There were 14 deaths last year, 17 in the 2 previous years. And we're in the early stages of looking at developing an integrated model between health and social care. So starting to talk about the 2 teams work very, very closely together, but is there something more that we can do in terms of a more integrated approach going forward? There are some other performance measures that are outlined in the report, particularly around ASCOF, so Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework. Paid employment, that is an area where we are looking to develop. We have a very well established supported internship here in Hillingdon, but ASCOF asks a very specific question, and I think there's some work we can do to further learn from best practice there. However, we are doing extremely well on people with learning disabilities living in their own home or with family, so that's very positive. We have relatively low numbers of people supported in care homes, large numbers of people supported in their own home and in supported living. And we continue to monitor the number of people we have in long-stay hospitals as part of the Transforming Care programme, so that's also a very important measure. Okay, and open it out to questions now.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that. Very comprehensive. I've got a few, but I'll defer to colleagues for the moment. Councillor Prince, you're indicating?
Thank you. During the pandemic, there were quite wide reports that people with learning disabilities had been issued DNR orders. Was that something that happened in Hillingdon that we're aware of? Just any kind of clarification on how or whether that was even a thing in Hillingdon would be great. And my second one is you talk about long stay hospitals and that there's 8 people currently in long stay hospitals and 3 were admitted during 2021. How long has the person who has been the longest been in there? I think that would be an interesting indication of how well we're doing to get people out of these settings and back into living into the community. Thank you.
If I pick up with your last point first, from memory, the person who's been in hospital longest has been there for a number of years. However, they do remain very unwell. We continue to robustly review and say, is there somewhere else we could support this person? I.e., is there another facility, or indeed is there somewhere we could bring them? Is there somewhere in which we could remove them from an acute hospital? And each time we've undertaken those reviews, which we tend to do quarterly, the response has been no, they do remain unwell. That's an unusual case. On the whole, we are seeing now a number of people being admitted for short-term periods of treatment, and we're working very proactively with the social care team to ensure almost when somebody's admitted, we're planning their discharge, and we're trying to understand what period of treatment do they need, and what if anything do we need to do to with regard to where they're being discharged back to make changes to support that. So the people that have been admitted this last year, I think have been admitted pretty recently, but we are already planning their discharge, and I think that's the benefit of our really robust Transforming Care programme, because those people are regularly reviewed collectively, and I think there's a real healthy challenge across the system that says, are you doing everything you can in order of addressing that person's needs both in hospital or indeed in the community? Coming back to your first point, I actually was seconded to work in the hospital discharge team during the first pandemic. I don't know the particular answer to your question as to whether there were DNARs used. I was not aware of that, and I was aware of people with and actually because of my role, was looking to ensure that people with a learning disability were being, if they were being admitted, were being discharged appropriately. But we can certainly ask the trust to see if there's any information with regard to that point.
Interesting to see if we can. That'd be helpful.
We can certainly ask.
Yeah. Okay, who have we got next? I've got Councillor Mcconnell next.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for this report. There are some really good news stories in here, particularly around the personalised approach, which has contributed to the high rate of vaccination. I have a question regarding that table on page 25. I wanted to know what exactly is an adult care scheme. What does it involve, please? Thank you.
Gary, if you would, please.
Chairman, that's actually shared live.
Yeah.
Can you just share a bit more about that, please?
So it would be basically people who are accepting, in this instance, people with learning disabilities into their home and actually providing them support in that context. I do apologise. It would have been helpful if we'd actually used the term that most people understand.
It's a great scheme from experience, and if only we could have more of it. But anyway, enough on that. Taking the questioners in which I've received them, Councillor Haggard, please.
Yes, thank you. A really good report and a challenging one, because I like the way we've picked up the areas that we need to work in. So I think that's so important. Just two questions to me. The first one is actually on page 25. Out of the 641 people, I'd like to see a breakdown of ages in that. The reason being, I think, and I don't know, but people that are diagnosed after the age of 18, so especially I think people around the 50, 60-year-olds that wouldn't have been diagnosed as having a learning disability when they were younger, because it wasn't perhaps known of autism, have we included that in there? So that's the first question. And the second question was out of those as well, we were talking about working. How many out of the 641 will we have working? Thank you.
Chairman, to respond to that,
Harry, if you're taking those.
The age breakdown is actually provided in the table. What we can do in terms of the numbers that within the age, within the working age group, we can come back to the committee on that in terms of the numbers that are actually in paid employment.
Your questions, Councillor Haggard, Councillor Tuckwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question we might turn into two. The complex care panels, I'll read with interest. How do they work in practice? Which agencies take part in that, and how many cases roughly are being discussed each week?
So the agencies that take part usually are health, social care, and also the positive behaviour support team will be joining that. So I don't want to get, I need to talk about children, and I was going to mention education, but that's the children's group. So it is the CCG, CNWL or providers of service, the local authority social work team, and then the positive behaviour support team. Who will also come to that meeting is the relevant professionals working with a particular individual. So you may well see their social worker and a member of the CNWL community learning disability team if they are involved. And I'm trying to think, there may well be other individuals around who are sort of reporting. The number of cases, I think that number changes and fluctuates. I did have a conversation with my colleague today, and I think she was saying that we currently don't have anybody on our dynamic support register, i.e. at risk of admission to hospital, that we're concerned about. However, there are a number of people who have been in hospital and coming out, and a number of people who we're monitoring to see that. I can check the actual number because I don't want to quote something and then be wrong, but I think it's under 20. But I can double check that one as well.
Got supplementary,
Just a really quick follow-up. I mean, thank you very much for a comprehensive answer. I'm just interested to know when you say I appreciate you can't put a figure on each week, but is there any sort of seasonal trends which might be of notice?
COVID certainly has brought an increase. I think we were very fortunate that our Transforming Care Partnership was established prior to COVID and was noticeable, I think, for the work that they had done in terms of managing high-risk cases, looking to see alternatives, and then putting in place alternatives where possible. So I'm not aware particularly, but I would say that we have seen an increase, linked to COVID, linked to people perhaps becoming more distressed, more socially isolated, their mental health becoming a concern, and then that leading them to be perhaps their behaviour escalating or their behaviour changing, and that needing us to monitor them more closely. But we can have a look at the data and see if it tells us anything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of following on from what Councillor Hagar was saying, I'd say the age range seemed a bit strange, having 18 to 64, but if it's working age, I can understand. But within that, there could be a lot of so I agree with Councillor Hagar on that. But within the table, I don't know what direct payments are. I'm not sure what that is as a service type. It's not clear to me what that is. And then secondly, on page 27, with the under section 13 with the challenges, under the carers, is how it's saying that people are reluctant to take a break and so on. I was wondering what exactly is being done to support them, and then to see how they can feel freer to take advantage of some respite and some time for themselves. What is actively being done on that? Thank you.
Who's helping us out? That's Kate, is it? Thank you.
I'll certainly answer the direct payments part. I can answer in part on carers. Direct payments, it's an alternative to commissioned care services. So in some ways, a direct payment will be given to meet one of these other needs. So rather than, for example, commissioning a home care package from a provider of home care, the person would receive their own equivalent amount to purchase their own care, for example, from a personal assistant that they would employ, or from a family member that they would be able to employ. So direct payments does give people certain freedoms, and it's something we very much encourage. So it's an equivalent amount to the cost of commissioned services, broadly speaking, that is made available to a person to make their own care arrangement.
So just to add something to that point as well, Chairman, regarding personal health budgets. Do mention that in the report, but one of the ways that a personal health budget can actually be made available is as a direct payment. So that's basically the health contribution to meeting someone's assessed health needs can be made available as in the form of direct payment. So it can be in form of a prepaid card, and the council manages the direct, or the PHB paid as direct payments on behalf of the CCG.
Thank you. Sorry.
Jane. Well, we might say the same thing. I think there's something about people trusting the professionals that they're working with, and sometimes it's the professionals having difficult conversations with people about are they okay? Why aren't they wanting to take up the offer? So I think it's probably there's a process that would need to be gone through with with somebody that they individual trust to help them understand why they might need it or why they want to take it. And I think sometimes people are frightened because they've heard horrible stories about what happens if you leave your child, if you've been, or the adult that you were looking after. So there can be those kinds of issues to overcome as well. So from a social, from a health perspective, I'm aware of individuals having those conversations with family members. But okay.
Just to add on the carers' points, I think the particular challenges through COVID were that carers were understandably anxious about having other people deliver care to their loved one, so they often wished to discontinue care arrangements that were in place. So taking a break in those circumstances did become very challenging. Both the social work teams and the health teams and carers, Hillingdon carers,
were in reaching and providing support virtually as far as we were able. And as lockdowns have finished and with vaccinations now being up online, people are resuming those services. So it is a case of ensuring that people have that ongoing support now that we are through that sort of acute stage of the pandemic when, as I say, people were understandably reluctant to allow carers into the home to allow them to take that break.
Okay. Gary, please.
Just add a bit more to that, Chairman. Was one of the initiatives that had been quite successful prior to the pandemic was actually developing carer leads in GP surgeries. Hillingdon has actually been quite successful in moving the recognition of the importance of supporting carers across all partners across health and the health and social care system. Unfortunately, the effect of the pandemic was to mean that some of the people who were previously leading were no longer continued in that role. So one of the initiatives for this year, one of the priorities for this year, is to actually resurrect those leads in GP surgeries. So again, we actually get to the point where surgeries are actually thinking carer, again to emphasise the importance of recognising the importance of supporting people in a caring relationship. We're not going to achieve coverage in every single practice this year, but as I say, it is a major initiative.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Gary. Okay, Kerry,
Thank you. I am in awe of the work that social care and social work professionals do every single day. But what would be great to know is how Hillingdon and the CCG involve those with lived experience and hearing from people themselves who have learning disabilities, or the families of those that do, and how they feed into Hillingdon's and the CCG's strategies for supporting people with learning disabilities.
Okay.
So obviously they are absolutely central to all of our interventions and those kind of one-to-one individual conversations. In addition to that, we do have a Learning Disabilities Partnership Board, which is attended by people with learning disabilities and their families. I think it is an area where we want to continue to strengthen and look to work in co-production as we kind of move on with services.
What I would add is one of the processes that are undertaken if we are thinking about somebody being admitted to hospital is something called care and treatment review. And part of doing that, one of the key people that take part in that conversation are the individual, and if they choose to, and all their carers. So we can ensure that if a decision is being made about their care arrangements and what needs to happen, they were a part of that. That process will carry on if we're worried about somebody perhaps needing to be admitted whilst they're in hospital, and then we'll also follow on sort of post-discharge. And I think as Kate said, it's an area that we want to strengthen, but on an individual basis, that person-centred approach is working through with families around what options they would like to pursue for them and also for the person they care for.
Thank you. I'll save my questions till last then. And my colleagues have picked up on a number of things I would have mentioned, so they save me a bit of time. A couple of things for me, really. Just on the question of the carers and the accommodation for people in this particular service user cohort. Anecdotally, we know that a significant number of the carers are somewhat elderly, and it does beg the question about what our thinking is around future planning for that. And I just really wanted to ask about how that issue is being factored into our thinking and planning around accommodations. That's one question I wanted to put. Second one is around employment, which we obviously, and Gary, you and I have discussed this many times over the years, the difficulty of securing employment. And I remember very well when fair access to care came in, and we were no longer directly providing support to people with what we used to call moderate needs, and language has changed with the Care Act and what have you. We knew that some people wanted to go into education, volunteering, training, some wanted to go into employment. I know the employment figure's low, but of this sort of cohort, I mean, how big a gap is there between those who want employment and those who are actually managing to find it? How big an issue is that? So I suppose those two questions, accommodation and employment.
In terms of the planning for the needs of people who may have older parents, for example, the point that Gary picked up on earlier in terms of the role of the GP, and that is absolutely key, because not everybody with a learning disability will be visible to statutory services. And the Hillingdon carers would then be very much in a good position to be working with the carers and signposting people in at an early time so we can start planning for that person. In terms of the actual accommodation strategy, we have fairly good data around sort of starters and leavers in supported living over a number of years, and looking at some of those trends, issues and themes, and that is factored into our sort of supported living programme. We have been able to increase our supported living options for people over a period of time to keep pace with need. We have a weekly supported living panel through which we're able to sort of monitor and see where gaps are and look at the services that we may need to move into or develop and commission. So that is something that we're kind of looking to, constantly looking on the horizon to see what we might need to plan for. So in addition to the younger adults who come up through children's services that we may need to plan for, there will always be a number of individuals in any given year that present to us at the other end of the spectrum who perhaps have previously been living with older family members. We also have lots of contact with that cohort through our respite services, so they will often be using some of our respite services for some years before they are required to then move into long-term accommodation.
Questions? Thank you, Kate. Employment, Gary?
I think the honest answer with employment is we don't actually know how many people actually want to be in employment. We don't have lots of data about people sort of clamouring to do so. It is something which can be a very positive experience for people. The reality is, in the current market, I think it is actually quite difficult to encourage employers to take on people. Although we are actually seeing gaps within the provision within the labour market, people with learning disabilities do actually need support, and that may actually be quite challenging for some providers. Doesn't stop us actually doing the work to try and pursue that, though, for those people who do actually want to go into paid employment.
Thank you, Gary. I've got one more question, if you'll indulge me briefly. Going back to what I was saying with Fair Access to Care 2006, the decision we made not to go with moderate care support for people with moderate needs. People were signposted to other services, drop-in centres, employment, volunteering, whatever it is. And I suppose the scope of this report is chiefly for those people with high level needs. But I'm just wondering whether, when we talk about people at risk of moving towards challenging behaviours, other issues, I just wondered to what extent people for whom we don't directly provide now, I wonder whether they're being flagged here at any point, and whether the outcomes for those group of people are, as far as we know, satisfactory from a health perspective, to the extent we can tell. I mean, this may be completely outside the scope of the report, but I was just interested in that cohort, because one of the concerns we had all those years ago was, if people aren't getting the direct support, what if they fall through the cracks and perhaps pitch up further along the line with a greater level of need? And I suppose I'm just wondering what we've learnt and what our experiences tell us about that, really.
So there are services being provided by the voluntary sector that are actually available to people who don't come within the national eligibility criteria that we operate, and a classic example is the hub provided by Dash, which is located in the pavilions. and there are other services provided by voluntary and community sector organisations located around the borough. They do tend to be set up by people who have a particular interest, so there'd be motivated individuals actually setting them up, usually in churches.
That's helpful, Karen. Thank you very much indeed. See if anyone else is indicating. Don't appear to be. Okay, let me. Were you indicating, Jane? No, you weren't. I beg your pardon. So just to sort of wind this one up a little bit. So thank you very much to the three of you for your input on that very interesting paper, which really took me back quite a bit. It really is wonderful to see the joint work that's happening, and I'm very aware, Gary, we spoke about the North West London CCG when it was in the distance and coming, and how it would work in practice and what have you. The sense I get from what you're saying is that early signs are quite encouraging in terms of how the partnership is developing around the preventative model and the early assessments guiding what's needed for individuals. So that sounds really encouraging. It can be a challenging cohort to deal with. Some people can be hard to reach, but from what I'm aware of the service, it's really very good, and that's borne out what we've seen and what we've heard this evening. So please take away our thanks to yourselves and to your colleagues among the Health Care Partnership, and hear from you again before too long. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So we come on, thank you folks. Come on then to agenda item 7, public health updates on initiatives brought in as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Dan and Sharon, you look a long way away, but I'm sure we can hear you. It's good to see you. Dan, I think you're doing a brief summary, and then we're handing over to Sharon. So please do.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll do a sort of brief introduction, and then I'll hand over to Sharon to pick out some highlights. So you have before you agenda item 7 in the pack tonight. Hillingdon's it's a report that sets out Hillingdon's response, and it's a partnership response to the pandemic. And really, from the start of the pandemic, Hillingdon Council and partners have been proactive on a number of different fronts, providing advice, support, assistance to residents, businesses, schools, care providers, amongst others, on a whole range of matters: infection control, the provision of PPE, contact tracing and testing as well for our residents, food parcels for our vulnerable residents, the rollout of the vaccination, which is led by the NHS but supported by the council, and a whole range of other activities as well through our contact centre and sort of general advice. So I'll hand over to Sharon now to provide an update on the latest position, but importantly, in the focus of the report is what initiatives have we continued with and that we can take forward from the pandemic.
Thank you. So, Chair, Councillor Corthorne, I won't be going through in detail the report because you've had an opportunity to read it. So
absolutely, that's fine.
I'll take the liberty just to look at 3 things: the priorities as they currently stand, the successes or things that have went well, and what are the challenges that we have had and potential challenges that we've got going forward. I think the first thing to say is it's not over, and that's not to be a doom bringer, it's just to state a fact. COVID is not over, but we're learning to live with it and to live with it safely. And I think that's to be the watchword for us. So in terms of priorities, it's about keeping our residents safe. So have in place interventions around information that they can have available, information about wearing face masks or social distancing. Yes, it's changed because the restrictions have been lifted, but it's about living safely and being sensible in the way that we approach these things. Still providing ongoing support for people who are having difficulties when they're having to self-isolate, those people who do have to self-isolate. Monitoring and surveillance. We've got a team of people who are actually constantly monitoring the data that's coming in around COVID in the borough, comparing ourselves to our neighbouring boroughs, because sometimes if Slough sneezes we catch the cold, or if it's somewhere it might be Ealing or Hammersmith and Fulham. It just depends on what the disease pattern looks like, because as you know, boroughs aren't rigid, they're porous. People are travelling, you've got the A40, you've got the A4, etc., and people are travelling to and fro, going to work, to play, going to school, etc. And it's through those sorts of contexts, through travelling on public transport, that the virus actually begins to spread. Also keeping on top of outbreaks when they occur, because they do occur, but you probably don't hear a lot about it, but we're constantly monitoring, and as soon as we hear of an outbreak through the London Coronavirus Response Cell, we're on it to ensure that if it's a care setting, a care home, if it's a school, if it's a place of work. So for example, early on we had a lot of outbreaks in Heathrow Airport. People may not have known about it, but we're having to liaise with and work with the Home Office, because often it might have been Border Force, because they're dealing with people coming in internationally. So we're dealing with all of that behind the scenes, and the team that worked with Dan, the environmental health team in particular, had a lot of work to do going into Heathrow Airport to look at the arrangements they've got in place to ensure that they were secure, to ensure that we weren't actually seeding infection from people working in Heathrow in the community. So we have to keep an eye on all of those sorts of issues. In terms of the successes, working with our partners around vaccinations, particularly the first and second vaccination of COVID, that has worked really well. The local authorities worked in terms of providing venues for the vaccinations to take place, providing things as simple as having parking permits and things to enable the staff, now that we're doing the booster vaccine for people who are at home, housebound, they're able to go out and give those vaccines. Just having those parking permits, allowing the staff that are going in to do that much easier for them than having to sort of hunt around for a parking space, because they've got a lot of work to do in a very short window. Communications, we've got an excellent communications team, and throughout the pandemic they've been on point in terms of getting the messages out to residents without frightening them, but very clear, concise messaging that have enabled people to live their life safely as they go about their business in Hillingdon, or if they're coming into work. And it's through a range, and we've listed them in the report, the various mediums that have been used to actually get messaging out to the general public. We also had a call centre where people could ring in if they had any concerns. They could get through to our public health team if they wanted any advice about how to take things forward, if there was an outbreak in their setting, etc. And then also MQS hotels. We actually were congratulated by the Director of Public Health for London for the MQS hotels that managed quarantine hotels, and we had the most in the whole country. We had about 20 odd hotels in Hillingdon, and we were able to keep on top of any outbreaks that took place in there to contain it, to ensure that we didn't get spread and seeding out into the community from those settings by people who work there. In terms of the challenges going forward, very briefly, I think the biggest challenge that we had was actually the second wave. So this time last year was very challenging for everybody because the figures were just going up. We didn't have a vaccine at that point in time, and the schools were literally going into meltdown in terms of the number of cases that we're having. Care homes were having issues, but throughout it all, we were able to contain those outbreaks to ensure that it didn't get out of hand. Vaccine hesitancy remains an issue in certain parts of our residents, in particular now amongst the Black African and Black Caribbean. Their figures remain low at just over 50% take-up of the vaccine, but a lot of work's been taking place to work very closely with them to try and understand what is it that's making people hesitant. Also, it hasn't happened yet. We've had the Delta, but there's always, as I said, we're doing surveillance, it's possible that there may be a variant of the Delta. So again, the London Coronavirus Response Cell and, I forgot the name of it, but there's a particular sort of people high up who are looking at these figures to ensure that if there are any variants of concern or variants of interest, they're being monitored and they let us know if we've got any within our borough so that we can keep an eye on it. And finally, self-isolation was a particular challenge as well, because you may have people who for whatever reason, feel that they wouldn't be able to afford to self-isolate. So even if they were symptomatic, they would go out. So we had to do a lot of work to get messaging out to particular areas of the community to say that there is support available for you if you let us know. Please test, please self-isolate, and also get your family tested, because we don't want it to spread out further in the borough. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Sharon and Dan. What question have we got? Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll sort Mr. Little first, so Tony, if you would, and I'll see. So can you show again, please, so I can just say we've got Scott and Becky. Okay, please, Tony, please, far away.
Thank you. Two questions, really, both in relation to schools. One is, of what scale of outbreak would worry you in a school? How big would it have to be before you needed to take drastic action? And the second one is, have you seen activity from anti-vaccine campaigners? And if so, what help are we giving to schools in dealing with it?
Thank you. So, in terms of the first question, what would be a cause for concern, perhaps, if I put it that way? I mean, we've got very clear guidelines from Public Health England and set out from the Department for Education about what would constitute an outbreak. And there is, during the pandemic, and not in place now, but there were very clear guidelines around face masks, hand washing, etc., etc. I suppose we would be looking for a pattern, really, and actually we wouldn't, because we receive information so quickly, we would be very quick to act and work with Public Health England, and we would organise, working with Sharon's team, what we call an incident management team meeting, where we would actually review, working with the school, review the infection control measures, perhaps, and if necessary, invoke certain measures, but that would be available to us, and we might need to seek, in such cases, approval from the Department for Education pretty quickly to put in place some of those changes. So it might be, for example, a year group now would need to, say, learn at home for a period of time, just to provide a break in the infection control. So I think, in terms of what would be a cause for concern, actually it would be any pattern or any sort of fairly quick escalation that we would need to act very quickly. So I think it's importantly having that information, that close working relationship with Public Health England colleagues that allows us to act very quickly. So we wouldn't be, for example, thinking it wouldn't get to a point where we would start to be concerned. For example, if half the school pupils were infected, we would get very much a much earlier alert. I suppose in terms of anti-vaxxers, we've had, to my knowledge, one issue with one school. But we've been working very closely, as have all boroughs in London, with the Metropolitan Police to ensure that if there are any concerns, that the police act quickly and ensure safety and public order, really. And so we've provided information to schools on what to do if they've got concerns.
Can I just say one thing? Just to say also, we're not on our own in Hillingdon or any other borough. The London Coronavirus Response Cell will say to you, there's an issue here, we need you to do X, Y and Z, because they have a threshold that's been agreed with the DFE. So if it does hit that threshold, then they will act, and they will then advise us. And they, as Dan has mentioned, they will ask us to call an IMT, which they will join as the experts, and they will then begin to talk to the school to see what arrangements need to be put in place.
Thank you.
Ollie, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have three questions, if I may. One is I had a look at I think it was London.gov or London Council. I went through a link to the latest numbers. So what's in the report is as of the 10th of October, 237.5 per 100,000. As of the 20th, Hillingdon was 7th highest, I think, showing up with Ealing at 322 per 100,000. So I was wondering, do we know what's causing that, or where it is in the borough? Also, my understanding, I might be wrong with this, but the testing kits, there's now a fee associated with them. Are we seeing any impact from that in terms of the testing going on? So it might be sort of contrary to the first point, but I just wanted to know about that. And also, can we confirm how many vaccine hubs we have in the borough? Because I think we had NavNat, we had the Global Academy, the old vinyl factory. So I want to get just confirmation of where the hubs are in the borough. Thank you.
So in terms of infection rates, I mean, you're absolutely right. We have seen an increase in infection rates, and we're following government guidelines and as a sort of watching brief at the moment. In terms of which cohorts are experiencing higher infection rates and where the impact is greatest, it tends to be in those cohorts who haven't received the vaccine yet. And so they do tend to be concentrated in school-age children. So that's where we've seen. We are expecting that. We're hoping that we'll see it drop because of the half-term break. But we're keeping a very close watching brief on that. In terms of the rollout of the vaccine for the 12 to 15-year-olds, that is in place. All arrangements are in place with schools, and the latest figures I have is of the order of about 17% have been vaccinated in that cohort, and that's continuing during the half-term break, and then obviously after the half-term. You raised a question about testing.
Yeah, in terms of the cost and whether there's any sort of adverse impact. Right, so it would be contrary to the first point, but I was wondering if you've seen any adverse reaction to about you paying for it.
No, not
payments for it, because it's community collect. People collect.
There's a fee associated with
that's not, as far as I wasn't there.
I may be wrong.
Yeah,
We've not picked up any issues on that particular front. And your third question?
The one with the vaccine hubs in the borough, to confirm where they are.
Right, so there is Winston Churchill that the Confederation are actually running, but we have a series of pop-ups. So what they're trying to do is go into communities where they may be more challenging to get them to go to a certain venue. So that the CCG is running a series of pop-ups across the borough. So whereas, for example, they've gone into Brunel, so they go closer to the students, because in the summer they tried to get them to go down to the old vinyl factory. It seemed to be impossible. They didn't want to go that way, so they're going onto campus to do the vaccine testing there. Also, Uxbridge College, they're working with them as well. Not necessarily Bucks, because they do most of their testing down in their other campus, down in Herts. And then pharmacies. So a number of pharmacies are also doing the vaccine as well. So it's more trying to get it further out into the community rather than having these big hubs that we've had. So all the big vaccine centres have now closed down, apart from Winston Churchill, which the local authority has coordinated access to that. Just in terms of why the numbers are increasing, as Dan said, it's the 10 to 19-year-olds. We've noticed it's in that particular cohort, but as they begin to get vaccinated, the numbers will go down. However, what we're seeing across London, it's that cohort, then the 40 to 49-year-olds, possibly, or 30s, it's people who are their parents. And what we're worried about is if the children don't get vaccinated, is it will then go into the older, their grandparents. So that's why you're seeing gradually it's eking out who's going to be vaccinated, because we can see where the problems are lying. So they're trying to get ahead of that to head them off at the pass. As Dan said, a natural circuit breaker will come with half-term. But what we have suggested to some schools, but then as standard you've got to get permission from DFE, is that maybe they consider, as they did from the autumn term when it began, having supervised testing when they first come back, because you don't know what people have been doing whilst they've been away.
Follow up then, Scott?
Very, very brief, thank you. Just in terms of the pop-up centres that are happening, is there a schedule available, or something we know where they're going?
We have to get that from CCG colleagues, but we could let you have that.
Okay. So if we can sort of share it with residents and things, thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, and Councillor Hagger.
Yes, thank you, and really great work on this, because it has been a challenge and a half and not something we expected, so I just wanted to say some really good work. One question I have is, how many free PCR testing places do we have? So supporting, obviously, the community, like nurseries, like care homes, where someone's come in with COVID and they want all their staff to have an immediate PCR testing. Where are they in Hillingdon?
Right, it's lateral flow that we actually have, but there are the, because I haven't got all of them in my head, but I can let you have that later, because you've got the MTUs, and then you've also got the LTS in Popping Lane, I think. But we can let you have that information as well, because there have been some changes.
Okay, just a quick observation before I wind up. This takes me back a little bit to the discussion we had back in April that some of us will remember. We were deciding on a major review topic, and one of the options was post-pandemic healthcare. And the point I made at the time was actually we're not out of the woods yet. You know, health partners have got all manner of things to do to get on top of manage this situation. And I think all we're hearing this evening really vindicates and underlines the decision we made, really. A good thing to do. It was just about timing, really. So I'll just make that observation. And if there are no other comments or questions, can I just echo Councillor Hagger's comments, just to say there's some tremendous work going on. There's nothing like this sort of unprecedented situation, really, to draw partners together. And I suppose it's what it teaches us for the future, isn't it, really? But please take away our thanks to you and your colleagues. And it's good to hear about the good things that are happening in this area of service, you know, which is so important. So thank you very much indeed, Dan and Sharon. Thank you. Is the recommendation agreed, colleagues? Yeah? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Feel free to stay, but... yes, of course. Yes, Wristbands. Yes, absolutely, Dan. Thank you. So let's move on to that rapidly without any further ado. I think perhaps, Anisha, if you would give us a brief explanation as to why it's before us, then I'll take it from there.
Of course, Chairman. So as the report indicates, in 2021, the narrow-tide Wristbands, the Residents' Education and Environmental Services Policy Overview Committee, carried out a review into adult and community education within Hillingdon. The final report details the information received throughout the review and the committee's findings and recommendations. The report was passed to members of the Wristbands for comment and endorsed by the former chairman, Councillor Wayne Bridges. And following the move to select committees in May 2021, the report is now submitted to this select committee for endorsement to Cabinet. So members are asked to endorse this report to Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. I'll move the recommendation. Actually, yes, I'll move the recommendation and take Councillor Prince first, and I'll comment.
A really, really pedantic point, but recommendation 5 refers to the Families Education Wellbeing Select Committee, of which we are not called. We are the Families Health and Wellbeing Select Committee. Otherwise, who are they possibly referring to? Very pedantic point.
Okay, no, well made, noted, I'm sure.
Noted.
Okay, yeah, so I think, it's a formality really for us to endorse the work of our colleagues on the former Wristbands, including our own councillors Rodriguez and Sweeting, of course, who played a part in this. Excellent report, another good example of what could be done. Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Nissel. It's years since you were a councillor. Even before my time, you were a councillor. My apologies. Old habits die hard. I'm going to bring you in. Go on, Tony, please.
Well, Chairman, I didn't mean to interrupt you in this, but I, as one of those who was involved in putting it together, I did want to thank officers for the work that they put into it, and to thank them for the efforts they made to consult us about the recommendations after the committee retired, I think was the word used in the report, so that this report can go to Cabinet. So I'm grateful for that, and I wanted to ask, will it be Councillor Bridges who presents it, or will you have to take over that responsibility yourself?
I don't know. Well, I'll seek guidance on that. Can you answer that, Nisha?
I believe it will be yourself, Chairman, as Chairman of this committee. There
you go. That's it will fall to me. So, but thank you for the question, and thanks for the comment. come on now to agenda item 9, which is the corporate parenting minutes. I'll pass over to Councillor Mcconnell. Thank you, Dan.
Yep, thank you. I believe that I did talk about this meeting as soon as it took place, but just that it was really successfully co-chaired with one of the young people, and as ever, hearing from the young people themselves is always valued and appreciated. So just to note the minutes. Yeah, agreed?
Is that agreed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, the Cabinet Forward Plan. I move the recommendation. Any comment? Is that agreed? Thank you. And finally, agenda item 11, the work programme. Just something I need to say about that, and that is the paper that we've got coming on CAMS. We haven't got coming because actually it's one that should be with external services. I regret that a little bit myself because I've had a lot to do with it over the years, and I know Councillor Prince takes informed interest as well. Maybe we'll pitch up at the external services to sort of listen on that one. So we're losing that from our next meeting, but I will say that the Public Health Integrated Service contract is one I'm really looking forward to. It's something that's a real opportunity for us, I think, so look forward to getting our teeth into that one. And then the SEN paper is, we're looking at January, are we for that? Do we know?
That's correct, Chairman. January 2022.
Okay, fine. That's all Tony?
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the report on CAMS. I mean, it is of interest to those of us interested in education, and I'm disappointed that it won't be coming to us here because of that, because it has been a serious issue in education for some time, and purely selfishly, could I request a copy of the relevant Select Committee report when it comes out?
I mean, it's a public document. Is it, I believe, isn't it, Anisha?
Yes, it's a public document, and I can get that to you.
Thank you.
Yes, I echo that. And it's changed a lot, the service, and the preventative side has developed significantly, but you know, it must go elsewhere, so I can only say I regret that, but that's one of those things. Any other comments?